the anime introduces us to Takeru Kamishiro, a simple office worker whose life is a monotonous cycle of the same commute, the same job, and the same trip home, an ordinary existence that, while comforting to some, leaves a part of him yearning for a taste of something different. One day after work, as Takeru seeks a distraction on his TV, he's suddenly transported from his couch into a white void, standing before the very man he was just watching. This white-haired man introduces himself as the supervisor of the solar system, clarifying he's less an alien and more of a god, though he prefers the mundane title of the universe's middle management. He reveals a problematic planet called Medius where civilizations repeatedly collapse despite his interventions, explaining that he now needs to create a small ripple that can grow into a world-changing wave, and Takeru is to be that ripple. When Takeru resists, the god nonchalantly informs him that he is already dead, and refusing this transfer to Medius means his soul will simply vanish. Panicked, Takeru accepts and is allowed to choose special gifts. The god quickly jots down extreme magical potential before Takeru excitedly requests a cute companion. The god agrees, adding on enhanced exploration skills for gathering materials, a practical storage bag, fluency in the new world's language, and various resistances as a bonus. As Takeru's body begins to fade, the god has a last-minute moment of doubt, worrying he may have given him too much and expressing uncertainty about the specific companion chosen for him. Takeru's alarm at this cryptic warning is met only with a smile as he disappears, awakening in a forest on Medius in a new body, armed with only the promised bag and a stick he found on the ground. Completely lost, Takeru decides to search for civilization, but soon discovers his abilities by experimenting with words. Saying, "Scan," reveals the names of materials around him. And his first find is a B-rank moonlit herb, thrilling him with its potential value. He quickly learns to gather anything that glows, collecting akane mushrooms, elemental mushrooms, and prara leaves, but his most valuable find is what initially appears to be a stone, which his scan identifies as C-rank hammer, pangolin droppings. Disgusted, but practical, he notes its high rank and also figures out that his exploration magic marks tradable materials with special icons for easy tracking. With a decent haul, he heads to a nearby town where a guard named Marlowe, surprised by both Takeru's height and his rare profession as a material collector, directs him to the general store. Takeru immediately draws stares from the villagers due to his unusual height, and inside the shop, he presents the C-rank droppings to the shopkeeper, who is surprisingly ecstatic. The shopkeeper immediately recognizes the item, praising its exceptional shape and quality while handling it with his bare hands and offering 5 silver coins. After learning a silver coin is worth 1,000 rei and an inn costs 500 a night, Takeru realizes the droppings alone are worth 10 nights' stay and accepts the deal, only to watch in horror as the overjoyed man rubs the item on his face. Giving a vague story about being a traveling collector, Takeru sells the rest of his materials, prompting the shopkeeper to offer him a job to collect mithril ore from the eastern mountain. Takeru agrees, receiving a map and a staggering total of 360,000 rei for everything, a sum that leaves him floored by his first day's earnings, though the shopkeeper warns him that the mountain is crawling with monsters. Though slightly unsettled by the monster warning, Takeru shelves his worries and checks into an inn, only to face a new crisis: the severe lack of proper bathing facilities. A staff member offers him a bowl of hot water for a sponge bath, explaining that actual baths are a luxury reserved for nobles. This devastating news brings Takeru to his knees until the girl mentions that mages can use magic to clean people, an idea that sparks immediate hope. Dismissing the girl with a generous tip, he experiments and successfully casts a clean spell, magically washing his entire body in seconds. While incredibly convenient, the bath enthusiast in him finds it deeply unsatisfying. The next day, while gathering materials, his tracking ability leads him to a deceased adventurer's body instead of a resource. He discovers a family amulet containing a heartfelt letter from the man's sister and, unable to just leave him, Takeru gives him a proper burial. That evening, he sets up a magical protective barrier and cooks a hearty meat and wild herb soup, thoroughly enjoying his creation. Continuing his journey, he arrives at the Forest of White Trees, also known as the Forest of Ancient Dragons, a notoriously dangerous, monster-infested area. Curiously, his scan detects no mithril ore, nor does he encounter any living creatures, not even monsters, which bizarrely leads him to panic that his own body odor might be repelling everything. Deciding a clear path is a good thing regardless, he makes a run for it, only to abruptly fall off a cliff, frantically trying to shout a magic word for flight before he hits the ground. Thinking fast, Takeru shouts, "Fly," and manages to land safely at the bottom of the cliff, where his scanning ability immediately detects numerous ore readings. As he begins gathering, a tremor shakes the ground, signaling he should hurry. He uses a flame spell to blast through rock and finally uncovers mithril, an A-rank material, but the small piece feels insufficient. Another tremor urges him onward, and he follows a glowing blue light deeper into the cave, discovering a massive underground lake. A scan reveals it to be SS-rank magical water from an ancient dragon's lair, his most valuable discovery yet. Distracted by this, he barely registers a deep growl and a booming voice asking who dares to awaken it. Too focused on the thought of collecting some of this incredible water. As he dismisses the voice again and reaches for the lake, a colossal creature erupts from the surface, roaring in fury. The creature, a dragon, demands to be heard, surprised that Takeru can withstand its immense pressure. Realizing his mistake, Takeru performs a deep formal bow of apology, a gesture perfected by years of office life, which amuses the dragon. After introducing himself, Takeru learns from the dragon, who calls himself Voldius, that it was Takeru's overwhelming magical power that awoke him from his slumber, a power Voldius claims rivals his own. It's only then that Takeru realizes he's face to face with the legendary ancient dragon. Voldius quickly gets to the point. He needs Takeru's pure magical energy to help hatch his son's egg, which has been stalled by stagnant, corrupted mana in the cave. As payment, Voldius instantly creates a massive chunk of magical mithril ore. Intrigued by the mercenary offer, Takeru agrees, and the dragon presents him with the unhatched egg. Impressed by the massive egg, Takeru is unsure how to proceed until Voldius instructs him to simply pour his magic into it. Assuming it needs warmth, Takeru uses his heat magic, but is suddenly and violently absorbed into the egg itself. He finds himself in a void before a different god, this one with black hair who scolds him for being reckless and creating massive ripples in a world he's been carefully managing for eons. Annoyed, the god declares he's reducing Takeru's ridiculous blessing before sending him back, cryptically stating a little trouble will do him good. Takeru awakens to the squeaking of the newly hatched dragon, who immediately pounces on him, smelling strongly of fish. Voldius instructs him to give the hatchling an alias, so Takeru names him Vi, short for the color violet. With Voldius's blessing, Vi joins Takeru's party, and the ancient dragon entrusts his powerful son to him before sinking back into the magical lake. After a quick cleaning spell to get rid of Vi's fishy smell, the pair find a spot to camp for the night. Takeru gives Vi some of the SS-rank magical water, learning that Voldius magically linked his item box to the underground lake, granting him an unlimited supply essential for raising a dragon hatchling. That night, Takeru effortlessly creates magic stones, which he read are quite valuable to form a protective barrier and start a cooking fire, then prepares a hearty soup with seasoned meat and vegetables for their dinner. As soon as the food is ready, Takeru notices Vi drooling and offers him a bowl, which the eager dragonet promptly scalds his tongue on, forcing a bemused Takeru to blow on it for him. Happy they can share meals, Takeru asks if Vi is lonely without his father, and the small dragon responds by cuddling close, making it clear he's content. Takeru is charmed, but a look at Vi's stats reveals the cute creature is a B-rank monster with an astounding affinity for nearly every element, the blessing of the ancient dragon, and the potential for infinite evolution. Reeling from the power of his new companion, Takeru resolves to be a responsible guardian, if only to avoid Voldius's wrath. He sighs, reflecting that while he wished for a cute partner, he was definitely expecting a girl, not a reptile, and is sure the gods set this up on purpose. The next morning, they climb back to the forest of ancient dragons, which now seems less intimidating. As Vi happily explores, Takeru gathers C-rank materials until a terrified Vi comes flying back to him. A quick monster scan reveals 7 aggressive creatures nearby, leading Takeru to realize his monster-repelling scent must have worn off. He sees an opportunity for valuable monster parts, just as a C-rank rock hawk, a fierce, carnivorous bird known for its speed and sharp beak, swoops in. Unimpressed after facing Voldius, Takeru's appraisal ability focuses less on the threat and more on the fact its meat is sweet, rich, and its spine can be processed into seasoning. Viewing the creature as a flying ingredient, he instantly erects a barrier and prepares an attack, creating ice needles with his magic and declaring that if he must hunt, it will be for survival and sustenance as the rock hawk dives. Takeru effortlessly dispatches the rock hawk with just 3 ice needles, but his victory is short-lived as Vi warns of more monsters approaching, a prospect Takeru only sees as an opportunity for more ingredients. A pack of C-rank serpent wolves, fierce omnivores with paralyzing venom in their snake-like tails, surrounds them. But Takeru remains unfazed. Buffing himself with speed and weight reduction magic, he launches into the air and uses hardened limbs to eliminate one with a powerful kick before quickly dispatching the rest with his bare fists. As he harvests the materials, his scanner reveals an overwhelming number of monsters closing in, forcing him to abandon a protracted fight. Vi desperately tries to airlift him to safety, and when Takeru lightens his own weight with magic, the tiny dragon soars too high and accidentally drops him. After a panicked dive from Vi, Takeru awakens unharmed back at their previous campsite to the familiar fishy smell of the dragonette licking his face. Grateful but shaken, he asks Vi to be a bit gentler next time, a request the happy dragon seems to accept. Continuing their journey towards Tormi village, Vi becomes curious about the stick Takeru carries, which he reveals is actually a dormant, SS rank branch from the legendary world tree, Yggdrasil. Hearing this, Vi breathes his mana-infused smoke onto it, awakening its power and transforming the simple branch into a magnificent staff. Takeru is conflicted, worried that wielding a staff makes him look less like a material collector and more like a flashy mage. His contemplation is cut short by a deep growl from the woods, and while Takeru prepares for another fight, the ever-curious Vi flies recklessly toward the source of the sound. Panicked, Takeru chases after Vi and finds him circling a tree, where a weak elven girl is slumped against its base. He assumes she was attacked by a monster, but the deep growl he heard before echoes again, and he's stunned to realize it's coming from her stomach. She weakly explains she hasn't eaten in 3 days, so Takeru quickly offers her his water and a packed lunch from the innkeeper. The girl devours the food, dramatically proclaiming its heavenly taste, though Takeru dryly notes that anything tastes amazing when you're starving. He questions why she'd travel so unprepared, but gets distracted when he notices her smell, bluntly remarking that she smells like manure instead of the springtime breeze he'd imagined for elves. Offended, but knowing he's right, she blames her days of camping before abruptly thanking him for his help, chiding him for his rudeness, and rushing off. Confused but undeterred, Takeru and Vi continue gathering materials on their way out of the forest. Just as they reach the edge, Vi spots a carriage in the distance, impressing Takeru with his sharp senses. Upon closer inspection, Takeru's appraisal ability identifies the horse pulling the carriage as an E-rank unicorn, a common draft animal in this world. The driver, assuming from the new staff that Takeru is a mage, offers a ride and is surprised to learn he's a rare, specialized material collector. Playing along, Takeru nervously laughs off the specialist comment as the man offers him a ride back to Tormi. After a moment of hesitation due to his size, he's warmly invited aboard by the man's wife and their 2 children, who find his height amusing. Takeru notes that children seem to like him in this new world, which helps put their parents at ease. The driver assures him there's no trouble, explaining that the people of Tormi believe in helping each other. When Takeru playfully asks the kids what they'd do if he were a bandit, they laugh and point to a small bell, a magic item that would have rung if he had any ill intent. After formal introductions, the driver is Porum, his wife is Elisa, and their children are Yunan and Kane. A small noise from Takeru's coat reminds him of Vi. At the children's excited insistence, Takeru cautiously lets the dragonette out, warning him to behave. While the kids are delighted by Vi's cuteness, the adults are stunned. Takeru explains he's a black dragon hatchling, carefully omitting his ancient dragon parentage, and clarifies he isn't a dragon rider but simply found and hatched the egg himself, a feat that leaves Porum and Elisa speechless. Elisa explains that even dragon riders are a rare sight, making a true dragon an almost unheard of marvel. As night falls, the family stops the carriage to make camp. Takeru uses his magic to create a fire and sets up another protective barrier with magic stones, reassuring the family that Vi will also alert them to any danger, which puts everyone at ease. As Elisa prepares to cook, Takeru insists on making dinner as a thank you, impressing the family by pulling various ingredients from his item box. He whips up his specialty meat soup, this time with steak, alongside a mushroom and vegetable salad. The family is stunned first by the appearance and then by the incredible taste of the meal. Porum is so overcome with emotion that he begins to weep, explaining that after days of eating nothing but dried meat, tasting such a feast with his happy children is overwhelming. Takeru laughs at the dramatic reaction, but Porum abruptly stops crying to accuse him of being a flavor sorcerer. The accusation is so ridiculous that everyone bursts into laughter. To end the perfect evening, Porum plays a guitar while Elisa sings, and Vi dances joyfully with the children, who pull Takeru into their celebration. For the first time since arriving in this new world, Takeru realizes the simple joy of sharing a meal and laughter with others, a stark contrast to his silent, lonely dinners back on Earth. And he laughs truly and freely from the heart. The next morning, as the children were still sleeping, Porin readied the carriage for their departure, and Elisa, curious about the early activity, approached Takero to see what he was up to. He explained he was simply maintaining his shears, prompting Elisa to praise him, noting that people who take good care of their tools always do excellent work. Takero found himself thinking that this kind of work felt surprisingly good, and even though he'd stumbled into it by chance, he believed gathering materials truly suited him. Finally, after breakfast, Porin's family set out, but this time, Takero chose to sit in the driver's seat with him. He took the unicorn's reins and urged it to pick up the pace, and to Porin's surprise, the creature obeyed instantly. Porin was a bit taken aback that Takero had already won over the unicorn, but Takero simply explained that the animal was just very intelligent. A while later, they arrived at the town of Tormi, where Porin's family bid a heartfelt farewell to Takero, thanking him for everything. Takero thanked them in return, since their kindness had saved him from walking the entire way back. After watching them leave, Marlowe commented that Porin's return was a sure sign that spring had finally arrived. Curious, Takero asked what Porin did, and Marlowe explained that he travels to warmer regions during the winter, making a living by weaving, so his return always heralded the coming of spring. Marlowe mentioned how difficult their nomadic life was, which made Takero understand why Porin had cried over his food, and he realized how fortunate he was to have his gathering skills. His thoughts were interrupted by Marlowe, who reminded him to report to Jerome about his work. Takero headed over immediately, and while Bai played with the town's children, Jerome began inspecting the items he'd brought back, including the piece of mithril he had requested. Takero handed it over, anxiously awaiting the verdict. The silence stretched on as Jerome meticulously inspected the small fragment, his grunts the only sound in the room. Finally, Jerome spoke, declaring that what Takero had brought was insane. His instincts told him it was true magic mithril ore. Although Takero already knew, Jerome was visibly shaken, demanding to know where he had found such a legendary material. Takero, shocked by its immense value, couldn't hide his surprise. Jerome explained that it was like a concentrated mass of mana, so powerful that a few fragments could replace all the magic stones used throughout the entire kingdom. Stunned by this revelation, Takero nervously began to lie, claiming he just happened to find it lying around. Jerome clarified that even if he simply stumbled upon it, the fact that he picked it up showed he possessed both luck and skill. However, he cautioned that skill alone wasn't enough, as Takero lacked even the most basic common sense about this world, which is why he strongly advised him to go to Belkane. Belkane, he explained, was a city 1,000 times larger than their town, a place where Takero could find all sorts of information and even an adventurer's guild to learn how the world works, and they would buy any materials he gathered. Jerome admitted it would pain him to see such talent leave, but if Takero could make a name for himself and spread the word about Tormi, his own shop would eventually prosper. Takero just smiled nervously, knowing deep down he had no plans to become famous, but the idea of the grand city intrigued him. That night at the inn, he decided to research the terms Jerome had mentioned, learning that a guild was simply an association managing adventurer requests across the land. The book detailed how adventurers were categorized into combat, support, and various other roles. Closing the book, Takero reflected on his situation. Being in another world, he desperately wanted to travel and see things he never could before. Becoming an adventurer seemed like the perfect way to earn money while exploring, so he set his sights on joining the guild in Belkane. However, there were still things he wanted to do in Tormi, so he decided to take his time. Bai seemed to agree with his plan, and over the next few days, Takero spent quality time with the townspeople, learning new things and joining in their celebrations. Finally, the time came for him to leave. A woman handed him various supplies for his journey, including a bag of broth powder made from rock hawk bones, and asked if he needed any other seasonings. Takero assured her he had plenty, thanks to her generosity. Suddenly, her expression turned sad as she confessed she would feel lonely without him. Takero admitted he would miss her too. She mentioned the villagers wished he would stay longer, but he explained there was too much out there he wanted to see to stay, even if he wanted to. Understanding, she promised not to hold him back and decided to pack him a lunch, knowing it would take him about a month to reach Belkane. Takero smiled, thanking her for the gesture, but she kept piling bags into his arms until he was grateful for his item box. Back at the inn, he pondered what to do with the magic mithril ore since Jerome couldn't buy it. Perhaps he could find a use for it himself. Bai also tried to think of something but quickly gave up and went to sleep. And Takero couldn't blame him, as he was drawing a blank too. Still, he felt indebted to the town and wanted to create something that could help them. Just then, a memory from the town's celebration sparked an idea. Using a lamp and the piece of magic mithril ore, he concentrated, picturing the finished object in his mind, and in mere seconds, he successfully crafted a special kind of lamp. The next day, the entire town gathered to see him off, and Porin couldn't help but cry. Before leaving, Takero told Marlowe that he had created a magic tool that projects a barrier around the town. This way, anything with malice or harmful intent would be unable to enter. Marlowe was stunned to hear how powerful it was and asked if Takero was truly certain they could accept such a gift. Takero explained it was his way of thanking them and a wish for their safety until he returned. Marlowe sincerely thanked him, assuring him he would always be welcome back. Takero replied that he would definitely return, as the town of Tormi was now his home. Everyone was touched by his words, but Jerome suddenly grabbed the lamp to inspect it closely. Just as he noticed the valuable piece of mithril embedded within, Takero made a run for it, calling out for them to take care. The townspeople waved goodbye as Jerome, left with no choice but to accept the gift, simply urged him to be careful out there. And so, Takero and Bai set off on their journey, wondering what kind of place Belkane would be. After walking for a while, he remarked on how peaceful the surroundings were, but at that very moment, they stumbled upon a giant crab blocking their path. Without hesitation, Takero used his appraisal skill and identified it as a C-rank Monblack crab, an omnivorous, edible burrowing type. That last detail was all that mattered to Takero, who excitedly told Bai that crab meat was incredibly delicious and that they were having a feast tonight. With that, he instantly used reduction and harden on his body, preparing for a fight. Before he could make a move, however, Bai darted forward and unleashed a sonic attack, defeating the crab without even touching it. Takero was surprised Bai had such an ability, but his relief was short-lived as several more Monblack crabs surrounded them in seconds. Unintimidated, Takero reasoned they were just crabs, meaning they could only move sideways, a weakness he could exploit. Just as he finished his thought, the crabs suddenly began charging forward, catching him completely off guard. Before they could crush him, Bai swiftly lifted him to safety, causing the crabs to crash into each other. Takero thanked Bai for the save but noticed one Monblack crab was still standing and decided to face it himself, declaring he would enjoy eating it. The crab lunged at him, but Takero unleashed his ultimate technique, striking it down with his staff. With all the Monblack crabs defeated, he wasted no time preparing their meal that night. First, he used harden on his hand to protect it and skillfully cut off all the legs. Once finished, he placed a large pot over the fire, tossed in the legs with plenty of water and salt, and let them boil. After a while, the crab was ready. Takero pulled out a leg, cracked the shell, and began to eat. Both he and Bai were mesmerized by the taste, making Takero more excited than ever to continue his journey, eager to explore new places and try more incredible food. Together, they savored the meal, and after a long journey, they finally arrived at the merchant city of Belkane. At first glance, Takero was completely and utterly awestruck, praising the fortress wall's beautiful architecture. He uses his appraisal skill, which confirms he's in the merchant city of Belkane in the kingdom of Alcerio, home to the largest adventurers' guild on the continent. Takero notices a long line for inspection before entering the city and decides to magically disguise his item bag to look ordinary. When his turn comes, he asks Bai to stay quiet and hidden for a moment, and the little dragon tucks himself inside Takero's coat. As the guards inspect his bag, one comments that it's rare to see a material gatherer and asks if he's there to sell his finds. Takero clarifies he's come because he's interested in the Adventurers Guild. The inspector isn't surprised, explaining that Belkane is the city of commerce and adventure. After all, he tells Takero that people like him are welcome but that he still needs to do his job and will cast a spell called Aberrus. Seeing Takero's confusion, the inspector explains it's a magic that checks newcomers for suspicious traits. The man approaches Takero with a magical object resembling a magnifying glass, but finds nothing out of the ordinary. The woman inspecting his gear also confirms his belongings are fine, much to Takero's relief. Still, he wonders what his status looks like to others, so he uses his scan skill to peek at what the inspector sees. His appraisal only reveals the man's name is Raiden, a gate inspector for Belkane's security division. This isn't what Takeru wanted, so he probes deeper until his skill finally shows him how others perceive him. A 19-year-old with no assigned rank, who can use magic and has some skills but possesses no spirit. Takeru notes his status looks rather basic and assumes the gifts from the god don't appear to others. Just as the inspector deems everything in order, he notices something else. Takeru thinks he's free to go, but Raiden asks about the dragon's blessing his magical item detected. Rather than explain, Takeru decides to show him and tells Bai he can come out. The small dragon pops out of his coat, and Takeru explains the blessing is likely because of his tiny companion. Both inspectors are immediately smitten by Bai's cuteness, but Raiden quickly composes himself and asks Takeru to put some kind of tag on the dragon to prove ownership. Unsure what to use, Takeru rummages through his bag and finds the charm the village children gave him. He ties it to Bai's tail, and Raiden says that will suffice. He mentions he'll notify the mayor that a dragon has entered the city and that it won't cause trouble. The woman returns his bag, pointing him toward the Adventurers Guild at the end of the main street, the largest building in sight. Takeru thanks them for the information, and Raiden finally welcomes him to Belkane. As Takeru and Bai step into the city, they are immediately struck by its vibrant energy. Takeru remarks that it feels like he's truly arrived in another world, even though he's been in Matius for a while. Following the woman's directions, he walks down the main street until he spots an enormous building, which he correctly assumes is the Adventurers Guild, and decides to head inside with Bai following close behind. The moment they step through the door, a girl with rabbit ears approaches them, welcomes them to the Europa Adventurers Guild. She introduces herself as the receptionist, Ariana, and says that new adventurer registrations are always welcome. Takeru follows her to her desk where she asks him to fill out a form with his name and current occupation. As he fills it out, he doesn't even realize he can read and write the language despite never having done so before. Somehow, his thoughts are just transferring onto the paper, a convenient, if mysterious, ability. Once he's finished, Ariana gets excited, seeing he's a material gatherer and asks if he has any combat experience. Takeru mentions he has a little, having fought a giant bird, a lopo serpent, and a really delicious crab. Surprised, Ariana asks if he has any proof of that last one, just for confirmation. Takeru hesitates, explaining it's rather large and he's not sure if it's okay to bring it out. A bit nervous, the receptionist urges him to do so. Takeru then pulls a whole Mont Blanc crab from his item box, one of the many he and Bai defeated earlier. Ariana immediately panics as the giant crab completely crushes her desk. Only then does Takeru realize his mistake, but before he can apologize, the poor receptionist scrambles away in terror. The cloud of dust obscures the chaos, prompting the other adventurers to ask what's going on. As the dust settles, Takeru awkwardly explains it's just a Mont Blanc crab, though that's obvious to everyone. After the little incident, he nervously asks if the crab will suffice as proof of his experience. Still stunned, Ariana tells him it's more than enough. However, one of the adventurers points out that he has an item box. Takeru confirms it but unconvincingly explains it was just a gift. Suddenly, the adventurer's eyes begin to glow as he uses some kind of skill on Takeru, observing him intently. After a few seconds, the man confirms Takeru isn't lying and tells Ariana everything is fine, as he's telling the truth and is blue. Feeling a bit confused, Takeru asks what he means by blue. The adventurer replies that he used Aberus, apologizing for using it without warning, and explains that his version of the skill reads a person's nature. Blue means he's clean, with no ill intentions, so he knows Takeru isn't a bad person. Since he wasn't lying, Takeru figures it's fair. Setting that aside, the man suggests moving on to the appraisal and payment. But Ariana reminds him that Takeru is still in the middle of his registration. This confuses the man, who thought Takeru was there to sell the crab shell. Hearing this, Takeru corrects him, saying he actually just wants to eat it. Everyone in the guild is left speechless, asking if he's really going to eat that thing. Takeru can only smile awkwardly, not understanding the fuss, since in his opinion, Mont Blanc crab meat is incredibly delicious. The adventurer decides to drop the subject and continue with the registration, asking if he has any party members. Takeru points to Bai, which surprises everyone once again. Having a dragon as a partner instantly boosts his reputation, and just like that, Takeru starts to draw a lot of attention. Noticing this, he begins to feel uneasy. Ariana decides to finalize his registration, explaining that according to guild rules, everyone starts at F rank, the lowest. She tells him she'll be supporting him, and Takeru thanks her as he accepts the bracelet she hands him, noting that now he and Bai both have a new accessory for their journey. Takeru located the deceased adventurer's family to return his belongings and deliver the unfortunate news of his passing. He informed them that he found the man dead in the forest near Tormi village, but assured them the adventurer likely did not suffer. The family wept upon hearing the news, though the adventurer's mother noted that he had always been reckless and prone to causing trouble. The father thanked Takeru for delivering the information, though his sentence was cut short by a coughing fit. Takeru immediately recalled that it was Raidon who had identified the deceased's possessions as belonging to Balluri Fent, a man who had taken jobs specifically to pay for his father's medicine. Takeru had only intended to hand over Balluri's possessions, but upon seeing the father's severely weakened state, he resolved to do more to help the family. Some time later, Takeru met with an appraiser at the guild, presenting 8 prara leaves, 6 pola roots, 20 pencil mushrooms, and 20 mother mushrooms. The appraiser was delighted by the materials, noting he had never seen such large mushrooms, and commented that their clients spoke highly of Takeru. Despite having been at the guild for a short time, they were already requesting him for specific tasks. Takeru admitted he was honored to hear this. Just then, Ariana entered the room to inform him that they had received many job requests for him, and while he couldn't accept them all, he decided to take at least a few. Ariana thanked him and confirmed she would notify the clients. After a long day, Takeru decided to unwind at the city baths, grateful that he could take a proper bath in this world. It had been half a month since they arrived in Belkame, and when they first arrived, the bathhouse was dirty, leading Takeru to use cleaning magic on it immediately. Now, he could end his days by relieving his exhaustion in a clean bath, and he couldn't be happier. While relaxing, a lizardman from the guild named Claystone joined him. Takeru was surprised, as Claystone usually didn't come at this hour, but Clay explained that his old scars were bothering him, suggesting rain was imminent. Claystone also brought up the rumor that Takeru could use healing spells, as he had heard Takeru treated a sick man in the slums. Takeru understood this referred to Balluri's father, whom he had healed using healing magic that day, clarifying that he was merely imitating something he had seen before. Though he admitted he hadn't charged for the service, Claystone praised him as truly selfless, but pointed out that he could have made a fortune. Takeru grew worried, asking if the healers who charged for their services now hated him, which only made Clay roar with laughter. Dropping the subject, Clay asked if Takeru had received a notification about ranking up. Takeru simply stated he was happy with the current situation and had no desire to rise in rank. Claystone confirmed once more that Takeru was selfless, but warned him that acting this way would only draw more attention. Takeru clarified that there were things he did desire, such as sharp shears for gathering materials. Clay left the bath, stating that wasn't what he meant, but advised Takeru to learn more about the world. Sometime later, Takeru returned to the guild after completing a job, and the appraiser once again asked him to. The appraiser once again urged Takeru to rank up, as had been requested multiple times, noting that given his demonstrated abilities, a higher rank was certainly within his reach. Takeru reiterated that he was truly not interested in ascending, knowing that if he wasn't careful, rising in rank could bring him more problems, and that doing as he pleased from a low rank was far better. A peace he did not want to disrupt right now. Just then, an adventurer rushed into the guild with terrible news: goblins were attacking. The guild master immediately ordered that all adventurers, rank D and above, be contacted to gather at the North Station, and that all available healing mages and medics be brought forth. He then asked a girl named Muesli which rank A adventurers were still in the city. She reported that Brow and Mohammed were absent, but Claystone was available. The guildmaster, referring to Claystone as the Honorable Dragon King, asked her to contact him immediately. Takeru witnessed the entire scene but decided to leave the guild, thinking it was none of his business, as he was only rank F. Despite this, the guildmaster stopped him immediately and told him that he was going too. With no other option, Takeru attended the strategy meeting, where the guildmaster announced that the front line was at the Stafford Plains to the southwest. The goblins were heading straight for Belkame, and they could not allow them to cross the bridge over the Salves River. All the adventurers agreed, and Takeru observed their passion, though he privately considered them to be true combat fanatics. As someone more inclined toward the liberal arts, Takeru knew he couldn't keep up and felt completely out of place. Just then, a pair of adventurers named Diego and Harold approached him, noting that since he was rank F, he should stay back and not get in the way, though they were sure he'd be too frightened to be of any use anyway. As they laughed, the guild master walked over to Takaro and mentioned that he must be the gatherer that Grid kept talking about. Takaro nervously introduced himself, and the guild master told him that everyone had good things to say about him and that it was rare for Grid to praise someone without reservations. Hearing this, Takaro offered an uncomfortable smile and said he was honored. The guild master stared intently at him without blinking, then laughed, pleased to see that Takaro was the first person not to be intimidated by his presence, betting that he was far more impressive than he appeared. Diego and Harold disagreed, finding Takaro to be a weakling, while Takaro inwardly wished he hadn't been praised so much, as he didn't want to draw negative attention. The guildmaster simply departed, saying Takaro could protect himself despite being rank F, and that he only needed to fight for what he wished to protect. Diego and Harold left with the boss, leaving Muesli with Takaro. She mentioned that she couldn't believe the boss was sending rank F adventurers out there and apologized. But at the same time, she was excited that they were there now. Muesli was confused but excited to participate in the action. She introduced herself and explained that she could use a bit of healing magic, so they had to work hard to meet the guildmaster's expectations in this battle. Despite her initial enthusiasm, as they headed to the mission base, Muesli was visibly terrified, clinging to Takaro as if her life depended on it, trying to deny her fear despite her tears. Takaro knew he had to calm her down quickly or she would be a liability. He reminded her that they were in the rear guard, where they couldn't even see the enemy, and yet she was terrified. If she could use her healing magic, she should focus on treating the wounded, because nobody said she had to fight. Takaro reassured her that it was okay to be afraid, and Muesli, for once, stopped crying and listened. He told her that combatants get hurt on the battlefield, so it was natural to be scared, and she shouldn't be ashamed for feeling it. Those who fight do so because they are afraid, and they just need to do what they can to survive, and she possessed the power to achieve that. Muesli quickly wiped away her tears, changing her attitude and regaining her excitement, resolving to do her best. Once back at the base, Claystone approached Takaro after overhearing his speech. Takaro admitted the passionate words were unlike him, but Clay clarified that he just thought Takaro could speak with passion sometimes. Putting that aside, Takaro mentioned that he thought Claystone would be on the front lines, but Clay explained that his old scars were acting up and his body wasn't responding. Takaro assumed he meant the deep scars on his back that he saw in the baths and asked if that was why. This was clearly a sensitive topic for Clay, who fell silent for a moment. Once composed, Clay asked Takaro if he didn't think such scars were a mark of shame for a warrior, since anyone would assume he got them running away from an enemy. Takaro countered that Clay got those scars defending someone, and though he was severely injured, he was still alive, meaning he could still protect someone else. Clay was surprised, but admitted that was one way to look at it. Just then, they received the signal from the guild master, who reported that the formation had been breached and enemy forces would arrive soon. Claystone grabbed a weapon without hesitation, saying he was going to the front because even if his body broke, he would protect them, and he left before Takaro could object. However, Takaro knew Clay wouldn't be able to protect anyone if he destroyed himself. Despite the chaos, Muesli remained composed, and Takaro realized he couldn't keep avoiding trouble. He drew his staff and activated a magic shield, surrounding the area with strong walls to protect the base. Takaro informed Muesli that he was going to check on Clay and immediately left, arriving on hands and knees to face the goblins blocking his path. He hesitated slightly, acknowledging that even though goblins were monsters, facing humanoid creatures was always difficult. Still, he knew he couldn't worry about that now, so he asked Bai to take them down. The small dragon prepared a powerful attack, and all the nearby adventurers immediately took cover. In a matter of seconds, all the goblins were taken out of commission thanks to Bai, much to the surprise of Diego and Harold. Diego and Harold thanked them for saving them, explaining that a high-ranking monster, a goblin sergeant, had appeared, causing the front line to collapse. They managed to escape thanks to Claystone, but they got separated from him and had no way of finding him. In another scene, we see Claystone fighting the goblins alone in the rain, but the pain from his scars caused him to make a fatal mistake. Just as the goblins were about to finish him off, Bai stopped them with a lightning strike, just as before. Takaro quickly rushed to Claystone, saying he knew the weather was making his scars hurt. Clay yelled in pain when Takaro patted him on the back, so Takaro asked him to retreat, saying they would plan a counterattack. No sooner had he said that than a loud roar was heard in the distance, and Clay told him he couldn't retreat now. Takero clarified that he and Bai could fight, but Clay warned him that even if they fled, the goblins would catch up to them. The goblin sergeant suddenly appeared with a violent attack, and smaller goblins surrounded them. Clay dodged the attack, telling them to escape while he bought time. Seeing his determination, Takero asked Clay if those scars on his back were important to him, wanting to know if they were a memory of something, or perhaps someone important. While fighting the goblins, Clay replied that they were only proof of his foolishness, and that he utterly despised them. Takero confirmed that then Clay wouldn't mind if he erased them, so right after Bai created a barrier, Takero pulled some Voldius water from his bag and splashed it onto Clay's back. He then cast a spell called Ridiphalius and healed his entire body. Claystone fell to his knees as his scars rapidly disappeared and his body transformed completely. Takero was stunned by how much he had changed, and Clay told him he felt strength surging from within, feeling young again. Thanks to this, he could fight the goblins with his bare claws, defeating them all in minutes. Once the area was cleared, the guild master approached Takero and asked if he was the one who unleashed Claystone's power. Takero explained that he merely used some healing magic, but the guild master told him he knew that wasn't all he could do. He also heard Takero cast some enormous spells, though that was actually Bai. The guild master asked who he really was, but Takero replied that he was just an ordinary rank F adventurer whose only skill was gathering materials. Despite how unconvincing that sounded, the guild master decided not to press further and told him the guild would reward him for his actions. That night, Claystone came to visit him, demanding an explanation of what he had done. Takero was happy to see he was well, but Clay clarified that he wasn't well at all, as he still felt a burning heat inside and needed to know what Takero did to him. Takero tried to calm him down, explaining he just threw magical elemental water and cast the Ridiphalius spell. And seeing Clay's confusion, Takero clarified that it was a highly concentrated and high-purity aggregation of elemental magic. The ancient dragon god had the highly concentrated and high-purity elemental magic water in his underground lake, which was connected to his bag. Clay was clearly lost. So Takero explained that Voldius was Bai's mother or father. The revelation that Bai was an ancient dragon surprised Clay, but he still asked why Takero had thrown that sacred water at him. Takero explained that because water elements were composed of magical power, he thought it would be absorbed through the skin and accelerate his recovery. It was truly an emergency, so he just wanted to do everything he could at that moment. Clay understood that Takero could use advanced healing spells, but once again, Takero insisted he was only copying something he had seen before. Apparently, healing magic was far more effective when one visualized the body's composition, and what he did only worked because he knew that important nerves were concentrated in the back. Hearing this, Clay maintained a serious expression and asked Takero who he really was. The question took Takero by surprise, and the heavy silence in the room made him feel conflicted. He began to wonder what he should do, because the young god hadn't forbidden him from revealing his identity, but doing so could cause a great uproar. And if that happened, he wouldn't be able to return to the life he had led until now, a life he didn't want to lose. However, Takero knew he was also responsible for what happened to Clay and couldn't simply lie to him. Noticing his internal conflict, Clay stood up with a sigh, telling Takero he wouldn't ask any more questions if it caused him such discomfort, and apologized for interrupting him. But before Clay could leave, Takero quickly stopped him, saying he would tell him because he trusted him. Clay paused, assimilating that there would be gossip, and finally, Takero confessed that he came from another world. A long silence followed that confession, but the tension quickly dissipated when Clay looked at him as if he were insane. Takero smiled nervously, saying it was normal for Clay to make that face after hearing something like that. He tried to explain the concept of reincarnation, and Clay assumed he meant when a soul receives a new body and is reborn. Takero replied that Clay was spot on, and told him he had died once and was reborn in this body. It took Clay a few minutes to process that information. Takero saw that Claystone was struggling to process the information, so Takero had him sit down and explained everything that had happened in detail. Clay decided to be honest, telling him the story sounded absurd and difficult to believe, but it was true that Takero had healed his old scars and transformed him into a dragon newt. A dragon newt is the ancestral species of the lizard dragons, and Clay admitted he felt proud to have taken on this noble blood form, though he was still a little scared, confessing he feared losing control and destroying everything. Takero tried to reassure him, saying he was sure Clay would eventually get used to it. Despite Takero's attempt to calm him, Clay grew furious again and told Takero to be more responsible. Takero countered that he couldn't go back to the way he was, and that Clay simply had to be careful not to get too excited. Clay clarified that it wasn't that simple and told Takero he had wanted to tell him for a long time that he does everything too casually, so he was going to seize the opportunity to give him a good reprimand. Takero was not at all thrilled to hear that but knew he couldn't escape, so he just had to endure it. Some time later, Takero and Bai decided to visit the city's artisan district, and after walking for a while, Takero stopped in front of a weapons shop, telling Bai that he wanted to buy something there. Just then, a woman with cat ears, clearly the shopkeeper, approached them, noticed Takero's interest, and greeted him with a smile, asking if anything had caught his eye. Takero decides to ask her if by any chance she sells shears for gathering materials, as his are clearly worn out and dull, but the woman informs him they don't have any, though she recognizes him as the material gatherer everyone has been talking about lately. When Takero confirms this, she introduces herself as Rib and says that in that case, she might be able to help him. She explains that her master, Grusis, is a top-tier blacksmith and will surely be able to assist, although he'll first need to acquire something the old man has been looking for. Takero agrees to hear the details, so Rib lets him into the workshop, where he is clearly impressed by their work. She mentions she is one of the people who fell in love with the forge's fire and assures him that one day she'll steal the old man's technique to forge a sword worthy of a hero. Takero hopes her dream comes true and follows her to Master Grusis's office, who immediately asks what Takero is doing there. Rib informs him he's the famous gatherer, prompting a skeptical Grusis to remark it's quite a reputation for a newcomer. Takero clarifies he's just been lucky. Rib then tells her boss that perhaps Takero could retrieve some Hydra ore from the perilous Ryujai mine for the sword they're presenting at the artisan exhibition. Grusis instantly refuses, stating he would never send a gatherer to such a dangerous place. Despite Rib's insistence, Grusis raises his voice, saying the answer is still no. Stubbornly, she reminds him of the deadline and provocatively pulls his beard, challenging him to use second-rate materials and see if he can still call himself a master. Enraged, Grusis tells her she has a lot of nerve and warns that the mine isn't just filled with monsters, there are rumors of demons down there. Rib admits she'd heard that as well and that it was rumored to be the reason the Hydra ore supply had dwindled. Grusis scolds her for not mentioning this to Takero, stating that a blacksmith who doesn't value life has no right to wield a hammer. While he appreciates her initiative, he won't send a young man to his death out of desperation. Moved by her master's integrity, Rib apologizes to Takero and asks him to forget the request. However, Takero simply offers them some cookies and says he understands the situation, then proposes a deal. If he successfully gathers the Hydra ore, Grusis must forge him a unique pair of shears as a reward. Grusis asks if he didn't hear the warnings, but Takero assures them he can handle whatever is in the mine. To prove his capability, he shows them a part from a beast that even B-rank adventurers would struggle to defeat. This is enough to convince them, and soon Takero is on a cart heading towards his destination beyond Buira village, which is managed by boss Raoul, when he is suddenly told someone wants to eat crab, but Takero informs them that unfortunately they don't have any left. Some passengers comment on the strange recent occurrences, like all the poisonous herbs in the Robri Pass withering overnight and disturbances in the forest of white trees. Takero listens quietly, trying to convince himself it wasn't his fault. After a while, he reaches a town with a horse merchant and thinks it would be nice to travel by horse someday. Just as he's about to leave, Takero hears a woman arguing with the seller and realizes it's the elf he met before. She's complaining that she ordered a pure white steed that could gallop through the skies, but he's showing her a giant white bird, not a horse. The man reminds her this is a horse dealership, and around here, any creature that can carry cargo is called a horse, whether it's a giant eagle or a giant bird. The elf, clearly unaware of this local custom, apologizes, admitting she might have worded her request poorly. The seller forgives her, saying he should have confirmed the details. Knowing she's looking for a white Pegasus, he suggests she might have better luck in Boss Raoul, the Dwarven Kingdom. The elf leaves happily with this new information, and Takero realizes they're heading to the same place. He tells his companions they can take their time and gather some materials along the way. First, he collects a norate mushroom, a poisonous-looking fungus with white spots on a green cap, which, despite its appearance, is a highly nutritious ingredient that boosts stamina. He also finds a maso mushroom, a red-capped fungus with white spots that promotes rapid growth. Takiro realizes the forest is a treasure trove of ingredients. They also find lunar nightgrass, a yellow flower said to bloom under the crescent moon, whose nectar is a favorite of spirits and helps relieve fatigue. When crushed, it can be used as an effective healing ointment. Takiro immediately uses his shears to collect some, but just as he does, a familiar growl echoes through the forest. This time, they instantly recognize the sound and, as expected, find the elf sitting against a tree, utterly parched and starving. Finding the situation all too familiar, Takiro offers her food and water once again. Revitalized, the woman approaches to shake his hand, expressing her immense gratitude. Takiro smiles, but is immediately taken aback by her odor, causing him to recoil. On impulse, he uses his cleaning magic, and in an instant, the elf is sparkling clean. Takiro sheepishly explains that he couldn't stand by and watch the pristine image of elegant elves be tarnished. The woman smiles and formally introduces herself as Belle Veretta Brole, acknowledging that elven names can be a mouthful for humans. She tells him he has done her a great service on both occasions, but Takiro quickly dismisses it, simply telling her to be careful on her journey. However, Belle stops him before he can walk away, insisting that elves do not repay kindness with indifference, though he replies that he didn't help her with the expectation of a reward. She insists, asking him to at least let her help with his work. Vi seems to approve of the idea, happy to have her around, so Takiro agrees to let her travel with them as a companion until they reach the next town. While he's gathering norate mushrooms, Belle comes running to him excitedly with Vi, claiming she's found something amazing. She proudly presents a rock, insisting it's the droppings of a hammer anteater, but Takiro uses his appraisal skill and informs her it's just a rock. Undeterred, Belle soon returns with another find, only for Takiro to tell her that this time, it's actual droppings. She tries one last time, and Takiro has to warn her that she's now holding a poisonous mushroom. Belle is surprised, then bursts out laughing with Vi at how terrifying that is, making Takiro think her mental age must be about the same as Vi's. When the sun sets, Belle goes to gather firewood, but Takiro tells her he has magic stones. However, she explains that leaving traces of a campfire is important, as it lets other travelers know the spot is safe for camping. With that, she heads off, returning a moment later not with kindling, but with an entire log. Before Takiro can question her, she tosses the log into the air, leaps after it, and with 2 daggers, slices it into perfect pieces of firewood. Takiro is stunned, wondering if all elves are this incredible. He recognizes her blades are impressive, and uses his appraisal skill on them, shocked to discover they are A-rank weapons, the first he's ever seen. Belle's daggers are called the Silver Jambia, a treasure of the High Elves. They are imbued with the power of wind spirits, increasing their speed and sharpness, with their effectiveness scaling based on the wielder's latent magical power. Only High Elves or those of a chosen bloodline can wield them. Putting that aside, Takiro uses the firewood to cook his favorite soup, which Belle is excited to try. With the first sip, she is blown away, and both she and Vi enjoy the soup immensely. Much to Takiro's delight, even if he thinks they're exaggerating. As they eat, Belle asks if he's also heading to Boss Raoul, and he explains he has a job to gather something called Hydra ore in the Ryujai mine. Takiro then asks why she's headed there, and Belle's expression turns serious as she explains she's searching for the white Pegasus of the skies, the one her sister Ryutakara has always dreamed of. Takiro tries to take her heartfelt quest seriously, but the dramatic moment is completely ruined when he notices the crumbs all over her face. Belle hastily wipes her mouth on her sleeve and changes the subject, noting that she has once again feasted on his food, increasing her debt to him. Takiro then suggests hiring her as his bodyguard, as he could use someone to teach him survival skills like the campfire trick. Belle is surprised he's asking for so little, though Takiro feels it's a significant request. After their meal, Belle declares that whatever fate brought them together is a good omen and accepts his offer, vowing to accompany him as his bodyguard. Takiro is briefly impressed by how reliable she sounds, but any image of reliability is shattered that night as her loud snoring keeps him awake. The next morning, the dark circles under his eyes are plain to see, but he carries on as Belle informs him that just across the river lies the Dwarven Kingdom and the Ryujin mountain range. Without thinking, he comments that it looks a lot like the Jotaka mountain range from his homeland, Bell has no idea what he's talking about, but he drops the subject and decides to find some food. They go to a restaurant and order 3 portions of Nana's specialty, meat-wrapped yuppie. He takes a bite and is immediately delighted by the flavor, while Belle remarks it's just as her friend described. He assumes she means another elf, but she clarifies that her friend is a lizardman with the title of Honorary Dragon King, a holy dragon knight of the Stolpus Empire. Her friend mentioned heading to Belkin, so he might have already crossed paths with him. Just then, Clayton appears out of nowhere and tells her it was much more than a simple crossing of paths. Belle greets her friend cheerfully, saying it's been ages, but Clay scolds Takiro for leaving without telling him. A nervous Takiro explains that he did report his trip to the guild, so he should have known. Clay accuses him of being too vague as always and asks where exactly he's headed. Takiro tells him he's going to the Ryujai mine to gather Hydra ore, shocking Clay, who says that mining contracts like that are far above his rank. Takiro explains that the blacksmiths seem to be in a tough spot and he couldn't just ignore them. Clay warns him that the Ryujin mine is extremely dangerous and the reward better be worth it. Takiro assures him it is, as Grusus promised to forge him the ultimate pair of shears. He muses that if he earns the favor of a top-tier blacksmith, he might even get a good cooking pot or an omelet pan later on. Clay is initially taken aback but then sighs, saying he can't tell if Takiro is just kind-hearted or hopelessly naive. Takiro insists that for a gatherer, a good pair of shears is more valuable than any sword, making it a great reward in his eyes. Feeling he has no other choice, Clay decides to accompany him, since he was already planning to visit Boss Raoul to get his spear repaired. Takiro hesitates, but Belle is thrilled to learn that Clayton will also be his bodyguard. She explains that she's already traveling with Takiro in that capacity, and Clay admits the title has a nice ring to it, so he agrees to be Takiro's second bodyguard. Now, with a scolding old samurai and a clueless elf by his side, Takiro can't help but feel a strange sense of unease. The next day, they finally arrive at Boss Raoul but find a massive crowd waiting to get in. Takiro notes that the entrances to all the cities they've visited have been just as packed, which is becoming a serious problem. Seeing this, Clay speaks to one of the guards, and they are immediately allowed to pass without waiting. Takiro asks if that's okay, as it feels like VIP treatment, but Clay clarifies he simply greeted a guard he knew. The guard leads them inside, explaining that Boss Raoul began as a mining settlement built within the great caverns left after iron extraction, and welcomes them to the Dwarven Kingdom. Takiro is stunned to see the entire city, including a pool, built underground. The guard then informs Clayton that the king has requested his presence, leaving Takiro even more surprised to learn his friend knows the monarch. Clay says you could call it a long and complicated relationship, but the guard insists there's nothing complicated about it. After all, Clay is the hero who saved them from the Thunder King Sengun himself. Clayton downplays it, explaining that back then, the dwarves were skilled blacksmiths but couldn't wield weapons, forcing them to pay tribute to a ruthless demon lord. One day, the demon happened to see him passing by, took one look, and fled in terror, and that was that. Takiro is still impressed, and the guard adds that to commemorate the day, they built a statue in his honor. The others are awestruck by the grand statue, but Clayton is utterly embarrassed. Takiro tries to console him by saying it doesn't even look like him, but Clay retorts that's precisely the problem. His name is on it, meaning people will think that's what he actually looks like. The moment he sees King Zargadin, the one who commissioned it, he complains about how ugly the statue is. Takiro then decides to speak with the king and presents a letter from Grusus Pendersus, the representative of the Blacksmiths Guild in Belkane's merchant district. The letter requests permission for Takiro to enter the Ryujai mine to gather materials. Zargadin seems to know Grusus well and explains that several months ago, following a great earthquake, the mine became a den of demons. Takiro affirms he still wishes to go. And Clayton informs the king that Takiro is under his protection, adding that Belle is also a formidable warrior, so there's no need to worry. Hearing this, the king entrusts them with a mission: to uncover the truth behind the demonic activities in the Ryujai mine. Clayton accepts without hesitation, though Takiro is clueless about what truth they're supposed to uncover, reminding them he only needs to gather some Hydra ore. But Clay accepts the mission, ignoring him completely. Later, they meet Sambo, the head receptionist of the city's Adventurers Guild, who informs them he will be their guide through the tunnels. He opens a gate, and they proceed inside. Takiro casts a simple light spell and checks the map Sambo gave them. Using his skill to identify different ores, he notes that the mineral reaction around them feels weak. Sambo is surprised he can tell just by looking. As they venture deeper, Vi suddenly warns them of danger, and Clayton orders everyone to get their backs against the wall. Something approaches. Clay and Belle prepare for combat, and Takiro supports them with his magic, allowing Belle to finish off the monsters with her daggers. They continue into the depths where the magical concentration is stronger. Takiro reaches a dead end but senses something deeper behind the wall. He puts up a barrier, hardens the surface, and unleashes fire blasts, breaking through the wall. Sambo is stunned to see veins of Ildrite everywhere, a super rare ore. Takiro scans it and confirms it's an A-rank material, which Clayton notes is practically a magic stone. Vi alerts them to another danger just as Sambo yells that a demon is approaching. Takiro's expression immediately turns serious, and he asks Belle and Clay to let him handle this one, saying he really needs it. At that moment, a giant crab appears before them, but all Takiro and Vi can see is their dinner.